time to get tricky. Else, and then inside of this else block, maybe I have another if inside of that. And this just like it's inside the else block, it could also be inside of the if block. We could do it in either one. But when we put one if inside of another if, that's called nesting. So in this case, if it's not greater than 300, then we can check to see if it's 187. And if it is 187, then we say, we ended up in 187. And else, we can say, well, at least we're not in C187. So this is an example of nesting where we put one if-else block inside of another one. So does that answer your question? Cool. All right. Any other questions about nesting? Yes?
Well, why does that if not have a bracket after it? I thought if you have an if, you have to bracket everything.
Okay. The question was, how come this if doesn't have a bracket after it? And the answer is, you only need brackets if you want to do more than one statement. You can have brackets with one statement, but if you want to do more than one, you have to. You don't have to have it if it's just one. Does that answer your question? Okay. Just I want to riff on this just a little bit. The whole idea of a statement block, of putting those braces around a section of code, is basically to treat a bunch of statements as if they were just one. So from the computer's perspective, it's the way of taking a bunch of instructions and treating them like one for purposes of the semantics of the program. So it's kind of like combining them to make it a little bit easier for you to do more interesting operations. All right, any other questions right now? What time is that? 3:43, okay. So we can also combine multiple statements together using logical operators. The way logical operators work is they let us say, if something is true and something else is true, or if something is true or something else is true. So in our example here, we have 4 is greater than 3 and 2 is less than 3. So 4 is greater than 3, that's true. 2 is greater than 3, that's false. So if we were saying both of them are true, then that would be false. Further down, in the or section here, we have 4 is greater than 3 or 2 is greater than 3. Well, the first part is true, the second part is not, but we're saying if either one of them is true, and so that's going to be true in that case. Yes, sir?
What's the difference between bitwise and logical operators?
Oh, the question was, what's the difference between bitwise and logical operators? And the answer is, we're going to get to bitwise operators, and I'm not bringing them up yet. So I'm happy to individually talk to you about them, but I don't want to confuse people yet. So, because bitwise operators are complicated. We are going to get to them though. But for now, the most important thing to remember is that logical operators operate on truth values. So you all have had discrete structures by now, or discrete math. So hopefully some of it, well, maybe not if you're coming from a different major. If you're a CIC major, I believe, many of you are taking it at the same time, I guess, right? Is that true? 3100? Are a lot of you taking 3100 right now? This is a prereq for 3100? Well, never mind. All right. Well, it would have been really good if you had that class already. So anyway, these are truth values. You're going to get deeper into truth values. I cannot believe that this is a prereq for 3100. Unbelievable. That's crazy. So that's and or. And means both of the values have to be true. Or means either one of them needs to be true, or both. And not is funny. Not is weird because it basically reverses the value. So if the statement would have been true, it becomes false. If it would have been false, it becomes true. So 4 is greater than 3. That's true. But if we take that and we apply the not operator, it becomes the opposite, which is false. 3 is less than 4. Damn it. Damn it. I mean, darn it, by golly. There. 3 is greater than 4. Well, that's not true, but if we apply the not operator to it, it is true. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about these? Yes.
You actually use the not operator
All the time. We use it for all kinds of stuff. Most of the time, we use it to check like some flags. So let's say I had, let's say I had a value, a truth value that holds whether or not something is an AI, or something is an AI character or is a player character. I might have some variable called isPlayer, and if I say if not isPlayer, then that means it's not a player. So we're going to get into the cases. It'll become a little bit more obvious as we actually get into stuff, but there are definitely use cases for it. I would say it's actually probably more frequently used than any of the other logical operators. So not is used all the time. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so just like there are precedents for mathematical operators, and we're going to take a look at this in a little bit more detail soon, there is a precedence among the mathematical operators and the relational operators and the logical operators. All of these operators have a different precedence, where all the way at the top is parentheses, and the very next one is not. That's the very next one. After that, we have multiply, divide, and modulus. Then we have add and subtract. Then we have the comparison operators, or most of them. Then we have the equality operators, the double equals and the not equals. Then we have and last but not least is or. And it's important to know the precedence of these because, especially with logical operators, you might end up mixing a whole bunch of these. You need to know which ones are going to get executed first. The most important thing to know is that and always gets executed before or. And has precedence over or. Okay, any questions about this general concept before we take a look at some more examples? Okay, so another operator that we have that we're going to be dealing with to some degree in this class is what we call the conditional or ternary operator, right? So ternary means it has three different operands. So not two, like plus or multiply or divide, but three. And what the ternary operator lets us do is it lets us assign values fairly quickly. Instead of having an if-else block, we can have a shorthand. But let's take a look at what the if-else block would look like in this case. So let's say we have some string called message, and what we set it to is going to depend on whether or not Bob is a zombie. So we check to see if Bob is a zombie. If Bob is a zombie, then we set the message to brains. And if Bob is not a zombie, in the other case, then we set the message to help, I don't want to die, right? So this is one way to set this message up. But there's a shorthand that we can use using the ternary operator. And it looks like this. So here we do have the message variable, and then we directly ask, is Bob a zombie? And then this is the ternary operator, this question mark right here. So we say, is Bob a zombie? If he is, the value will be brains. Otherwise, the value will be help, I don't want to die. So message is assigned the value of either brains or help, I don't want to die, depending on the value that Bob is zombie returns. Whatever, if Bob is a zombie, it does one thing. If he's not a zombie, it does another. But these two sections of code, they function the same way. They do the same thing in the end. It's just one is a whole lot shorter. So I know this one's a little complicated. So I want to give it a couple of minutes. Does anybody have any questions about this one? Yes. Is there anything, the question was, is there any way to do an if-then with a ternary operator? And the answer is the ternary operator is a very specific subset, so it's mostly when you're assigning values. I might be able to torture another way out of it, but I can't think of one offhand. So, yes? I'm not sure I totally understand the question. Could you repeat it? Oh, Oh, the question was, can you use the ternary operator after you've already assigned values, like to reassign a value, you mean? Yeah, absolutely. So just in this case, I happen to be using it with a new string definition, but it could be with a pre-existing string. Does that answer your question? Okay. And then did someone over here? I thought I saw a hand. Yes?
Observation, but the second thing, like the second thing, it's a lot harder than the first.
Yeah, it's a good observation. Yes. The observation was, oh, this is really hard to read compared to that. And it is, you know. You get used to it, I would say, to be perfectly honest, after you've been doing it for a while and looking at these expressions, it becomes more clear. But that is definitely a trade-off. When you use a ternary operator, sometimes it's less clear. There's no question. It gets a little harder to understand sometimes. Okay, yes? Oh my God, that would be gross. So the question was, can you nest something in a ternary operator the way you can nest ifs inside of ifs? And the answer is yes, you can. Oh my God, please don't do that. But yes, you can write awful, horrible, cruel code if you want to, but I would prefer if you didn't. And so will any future teammates. So, but yes, technically it is doable. We often say of the C family of languages that they're like a sawed-off shotgun. And they're very powerful, but also you can blow your foot off. So, did you have a question? The question was, what are the pros and cons of using the ternary operator? So, believe it or not, I know this might be hard to believe, but once you've been programming for a while, this actually gets much easier to read, and you can kind of process it really quickly. So when you're working with programmers who have been doing it for a while, if you have clean syntax, and that's particularly crucial. If you have clean syntax, this is actually pretty easy for more advanced programmers to read, and it takes up a lot less space, so you can have a lot more on the screen at once. If you're working with people who are very new to programming, it's definitely something that is harder to parse, there's no question. That's the main difference. Does that answer your question? It's mostly a readability thing. Yes?
What's that question mark doing?
What's the question mark doing? The question mark is the ternary operator. Like, that's the operator, literally. So the ternary, actually, I should say the ternary operator has two parts, two symbols, the question mark and the colon. So the question mark delineates the possible answers from the condition you're testing. So the ordering is condition, question mark, true case, colon, false case. Does that answer your question? All right. Yes?
Can ternary operators be split up into multiple lines?
The question was, can ternary operators be split up into multiple lines? And yes, you can split them up into multiple lines. Almost anything in the C family of languages, that includes Java, the spacing is totally up to you, and that includes new lines. Yes?
Can you use brackets to nest multiple statements or just an assignment?
Oh man, the question was, can you use brackets to nest things inside of the ternary operator? Yeah, probably. If you do, you're an awful human being. Yes, this closer hand. Yes, you, yeah.
When it comes to the ternary operator, don't we need parentheses for the quotations of
Okay, the question was, don't we need parentheses around these quotation marks with the brains and help me, I don't want to die? And the answer is, you don't. The parentheses we used before were actually because we were calling methods, right? When we call a method, every method has to have parentheses. But actually, because these are just strings, we don't need parentheses around them. And then I think there was another, yes?
I was going to say, do you need, with the if and else, did you not need the brackets or?
Right, that's a good question. The question was, with the if and else, do I not need the brackets? And the answer is, if I only have a single line, I do not need brackets. If I have more than one instruction, then I do need brackets. But because these are only one instruction each, they don't need the brackets. Yes?
With the ternary operators, do you have to keep it all in line, a single line with Python, or can you break it up?
No, you can break it across multiple lines. So the ternary operator, everything in Java and C and C++, anytime there's a space that's not between two parentheses, you can always start a new line and put as much space as you want. I'm not sure that you would want to for readability reasons, but you certainly could if you found a way that you thought was good. All right, anybody else? Okay, I think it's probably a good time for us to take a break. So let's take a break for 15 minutes. Please be back.